Well, it happened again. Literally, while we were sleeping, everything changed. In fact, the change is the single biggest change in education in the history of education. In my view, it's a change bigger than the invention of the printing press. It's a change bigger than the invention of radio, television, movies, the internet, social media, anything that's preceded it. Because for the very first time, our students can produce original works that they had nothing to do with at all. What am I talking about? Clearly, if you're following the story, I'm talking about the rise of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence up to now hasn't been that intelligent. Those of you that use Siri on a regular basis or other types of AI know its limitations. I know after some early experiments with AI, I just became quickly disillusioned with it and realized that it would be much faster for me to get the information I needed without having to rely on a virtual personal assistant. But that world has suddenly shifted in a very dramatic way. We now have ChatGPT. I've talked about ChatGPT in different live settings over the last couple of months, but it is changing everything. When a student can go home and in a matter of seconds produce an original poem, an original short story, or an original essay, complete with different references and the latest research, we have to recognize that we're in trouble. There's been a lot of conversation about how to deal with the advent of this AI age. Some suggestions are worth considering and others are impractical. But one thing I would like for all of you to consider as you think about how to continue to have a dynamic learning environment when there are now robots who can really simulate learning in a way that is superior to what our students can do, at least in terms of providing written evidence of their learning. I would suggest that we follow what we already know about great learning strategies, and we begin to work very, very hard at applying those principles in our classrooms. Many of you are familiar with the work of John Hattie and all of the research that he's done based on other people's research about optimal practices in the classroom. And one of the strongest results of all of his research indicates that one of the single most transformational things you can do for a child is to enter into learning dialogue with them throughout that occurs throughout the year, in which you give them direct feedback on their learning outcomes, and more importantly, provide strategies for improvement. So it is that interaction between the teacher and the student that's all about an accurate reflection of how they've done on an assignment, on a test, and then more importantly, clear direction as to how to work in a very specific way to improve learning, improve skill representation, improve general student outcomes. Those two elements do the most good in a student's life, more so than standing in front of the class and teaching a concept. And so it would seem to me, in light of the advent of ChatGPT and all of the other artificial intelligence platforms that are already being launched, that we might want to think about this. We might want to think about turning after school time into a time where they either read or watch videos or something that we ourselves have recorded that teaches a concept. And this is not a new idea. This reverse classroom is something that's been talked about for quite a while now. But I think we have no choice but to move in that direction. So when we send work for students to do at home, it's actually learning, not necessarily the writing of essays or the calculation of formulas, which could easily be done now by these incredible artificial intelligence platforms. And then what happens is when they come back to school, the school setting is the time at which they apply their learning. So that's when the writing happens. That's when potentially putting together essays or putting together presentations or hosting very specific one-on-one sessions between the student and the teacher, or groups of students and the teacher, where the students in some way represent what they've learned and demonstrate their level of comprehension, and then get guiding direction from the teacher as to how to continue to improve their learning. And as I pointed out, it doesn't have to necessarily be the teacher meeting with every student every single day. There's other ways of having this conversation. As an example, it can be a whole class activity where students are invited, who feel confident, are invited to stand up and teach their peers what they watched or read the night before. And and then their peers are required to respond to the person that stood up and taught as to how accurately or how clearly that person represented it. So what I'm saying in its simplest form is we have got to rethink how our classrooms operate. And we have got to rethink how students are doing their homework. Because I'm going to tell you that if we continue to do what we've been doing for decades, what is going to increasingly happen is our students are going to hand in great essays, great short stories, great representations of their learning that they themselves have not produced outside of typing in a question. And we don't want that outcome. We don't want cut and paste essays. And I don't mean cut and paste in the old way where you actually plagiarize somebody's work and pretended it was yours. Because if you are familiar with these platforms, they actually generate original material. And it sounds like a real representation of that person's learning. In fact, you can tune the response this way. You can say, please write an essay on the solar system from a grade 7 reading and writing level. And you can even go as far as saying, and please include 6 spelling mistakes and 5 grammatical errors so the teacher doesn't get suspicious. You can do that right now. So to suggest that if I get an essay and it's perfect, then obviously it's generated by AI. No, actually AI is better than that. It'll generate a flawed piece of work to disguise the fact that it wasn't actually written by the student. So we've got to reckon that this is happening. Some of our students are already using AI. In fact, my daughter, who's going to university, had her ethics professor confess that he was developing his lesson plans with AI. And all of the scenarios, the ethical scenarios that the students had to write responses to, were generated by AI. So it's changing everything so quickly, it's hard to get our head around it. Please, please, please spend time between now and next year thinking about how you can ensure that your learning environment is the one that continues to feature your students developing their thinking and critical learning skills, and not simply outsourcing that through a very, very effective artificial intelligence platform that is only going to get better and better and better and better every single day. So that is the end of today's video. In the final one that I'm going to do in June, I actually want to talk a little bit about the limitations of AI, why I don't think AI is going to take over the world, but why I think we nevertheless have to begin to think in very, very strategic ways about the way it's going to reshape everything in the very near future. Have a great month.